At 0500 local time along the static tree lines of the Avdiivka sector, the morning silence was not broken by a whistle or a shout, but by the synchronized coughing of 400 armored vehicle engines. This was the opening note of a Russian spring offensive that the Kremlin expected to finally fracture the Ukrainian center. Instead, the Russian Federation was about to experience the single deadliest 24-hour period of 2026. While Moscow's planners viewed the muddy fields as a simple geometric problem of mass versus resistance, the Ukrainian defenders had turned the landscape into a digital killbox. Before the first Russian T-72 tank could even clear its own minefield markers, a swarm of 500 first-person view drones was already rising from hidden basements and dugouts 3 miles behind the front. Each drone cost less than $500, yet carried a shaped charge capable of turning a $40 million armored column into a series of stationary bonfires. By the time the sun had fully cleared the horizon, over 600 individual assault actions had been logged by Ukrainian command, yet the total territorial gain for the Russian forces was measured in inches, not miles. The math of the modern battlefield had shifted, and the cost of entry for this offensive was being collected in blood and burning steel at a rate that defied historical precedent. Before we continue, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. The primary threat to the Russian advance was not a massive artillery barrage, but a localized network of electronic warfare and low-cost persistence. As the lead Russian elements pushed toward the village of Berdichi, they entered a 3-mile stretch of road that military analysts are now calling the Valley of Scrapyard. The Russian commanders had equipped their tanks with makeshift electronic jamming cages, nicknamed turtle tanks, designed to disrupt the radio frequencies used by Ukrainian drone pilots. It was a clever adaptation that worked for exactly 45 seconds. The Ukrainian pilots, realizing their standard signals were being jammed, simply shifted to fiber-optic-guided munitions. These drones trail a thin wire of glass behind them, making them immune to any electronic interference known to man. The lead Russian tank, a T-90M outfitted with the latest reactive armor, was struck directly in the engine vent by a drone the pilot guided with the precision of a surgeon. The explosion did not just disable the vehicle, it blocked the narrow transit route for the 20 armored vehicles following behind it. Within 2 minutes, the entire column was trapped between a minefield and a burning wreck, and the Ukrainian heavy artillery began to adjust their fire based on a live 4K feed from an overhead reconnaissance drone. As the armored column sat paralyzed, the Ukrainian 47th Mechanized Brigade began the process of systematic liquidation. They did not use expensive long-range missiles for this task. They used the cluster munitions that the United States had provided in late 2025. Each shell contains 88 individual submunitions, designed to carpet an area the size of 2 football fields with lethal shrapnel. The Russian infantry, forced to dismount from their trapped carriers, found themselves in an environment where there was nowhere to hide. The frozen ground offered no easy digging, and the tree lines had long since been stripped bare by months of shelling. In a span of 60 minutes, an entire battalion-strength element was effectively removed from the Russian order of battle. This was the first major fast win of the day for the defenders, proving that massed armor could no longer survive in a transparent battle space. However, the Russian command did not blink. They simply ordered the second wave to drive over the wreckage of the first. This cycle of attrition was not a mistake. It was a deliberate strategy to exhaust Ukrainian ammunition supplies. But the Ukrainians had a different plan involving a deep strike capability that the Russians had not yet accounted for in their morning briefings. While the carnage continued on the front lines, a pair of Ukrainian-modified Su-24 bombers were flying at treetop level over the Poltava region, heading east. Under their wings sat the Storm Shadow cruise missiles, weapons that use terrain-matching radar and an internal heat-seeking camera to find their targets with sub-meter accuracy. Their objective was not the front line, but the Russian logistical hub at Luhansk, where the fuel and ammunition for the spring's offensive were being stockpiled. The Russian air defense network, consisting of S-400 and Pantsir systems, was currently occupied trying to intercept hundreds of decoy drones that the Ukrainians had launched simultaneously. This was a classic suppression of enemy air defense maneuver, using low-cost noise to hide the high-cost signal. As the Storm Shadows reached their terminal phase, they popped up to 2,000 feet before diving vertically into the roof of a massive ammunition depot. The resulting secondary explosions were so powerful they were detected by seismic sensors in neighboring countries. In one stroke, the fuel needed for the next 3 days of the Russian offensive was converted into a mushroom cloud, leaving the frontline units with less than 12 hours of combat endurance. Back at the zero line, the Russian tactical situation was deteriorating from a coordinated assault into a series of isolated survival struggles. 600 assault actions reported by the Ukrainian General Staff were not a sign of Russian strength, but a symptom of a fractured command structure. Small units of 10 to 15 soldiers were being sent into the meat grinder without armor support or even basic radio communication. Many of these soldiers were part of the newly formed Storm V units, composed of personnel with minimal training and even less equipment. They were expected to sprint across 500 yards of open ground under the constant observation of thermal imaging drones. One such group managed to reach the outskirts of a Ukrainian trench line, only to discover that the trench was empty. It was a trap. The Ukrainians had rigged the position with remote-controlled claymore mines and moved their infantry to a secondary line 200 yards back. When the Russian unit entered the trench to seek cover, the entire position was detonated. Success on the modern battlefield is no longer about holding a specific piece of dirt. It is about controlling the space around that dirt with superior situational awareness. The Russian tactical failure at the trench line was just the beginning of a 48-hour downward spiral for the Kremlin's regional command, as the second wave of Russian armor attempted to bypass the burning wreckage of the morning's first disaster. They encountered a weapons system that has redefined the geography of the Donetsk region. The Ukrainian military had deployed a remote mining system known as the RAM, or Remote Anti-Armor Mine. These are 15-millimeter shells that do not explode on impact. Instead, they scatter 9 individual anti-tank mines across a field in seconds. A Russian T-80 BVM, traveling at 30 miles per hour through what the commander believed was a cleared path, struck one of these mines, blowing its tracks off instantly. The crew, trapped in a steel box in the middle of a zero-visibility kill zone, had approximately 30 seconds to evacuate before a Ukrainian drone pilot, watching the entire event from 2,000 feet, dropped a thermobaric grenade through the open hatch. This was not a random occurrence, but a calculated mathematical trap. For every 60 minutes the Russian column remained stationary, the Ukrainians were able to cycle 3 fresh drone batteries, ensuring that no vehicle remained unmonitored for more than 10 seconds. While the armor burned, the Russian infantry attempted a flanking maneuver through a series of drainage pipes and collapsed industrial basements near the coke plant. They were led by an elite Spetsnaz unit, equipped with thermal optics and suppressed weapons, moving in total silence through the subterranean darkness. Their objective was to take out the Ukrainian drone operators who were directing the slaughter from above. However, the Ukrainians had anticipated this move by installing vibration sensors and motion-activated cameras throughout the industrial ruins. The Russian elite team was caught in a crossfire of automated machine gun turrets and pre-sighted mortar positions before they could even surface. The fast win for the Ukrainian side was the elimination of a high-value special operations team for the price of a few thousand rounds of ammunition and a handful of sensor nodes. This loss stripped the Russian offensive of its eyes and ears on the northern flank, leaving the remaining conscript units to stumble blindly into an increasingly complex web of defensive layers. The Russian command, refusing to acknowledge the mounting casualties, ordered a third wave of T-62 tanks, some of which were older than the grandfathers of the men driving them, to push toward the Ukrainian center. The appearance of T-62 tanks on the battlefield was a clear indicator of the logistical strain the Russian Federation was suffering after only 24 hours of high-intensity combat. These tanks, built in the 1960s, lacked the modern optics and fire control systems necessary to engage targets at long range. The Ukrainian defenders, using Swedish-made Archer artillery systems, began picking them off from 20 miles away. The Archer is a wheeled howitzer that can fire 3 rounds in 15 seconds and then move its position before the first shell even hits the ground. This shoot-and-scoot tactic made the Ukrainian artillery virtually invulnerable to Russian counter-battery fire. Each 15mm shell was equipped with a bonus submunition sensor that scans the ground for the heat signature of a tank engine. When a match is found, the submunitions fire a high-velocity slug through the thin top armor of the vehicle. In a single afternoon, over 40 Russian armored vehicles were converted into scrap metal without ever seeing the enemy they were fighting. The cost of this one engagement was estimated at over $100 million in lost Russian equipment, while the Ukrainian expenditure was less than $200,000 in precision shells. This economic disparity in the cost of warfare is what truly defines the deadliest day of the year. While Russia is spending billions of rubles to move massive quantities of men and machines to the front, Ukraine is using a decentralized network of small teams to dismantle that mass with surgical precision. One such team, a specialized drone unit known as the Birds of Magyar, spent the evening hours hunting Russian electronic warfare trucks. These trucks, the Krasur and Pol-21 systems, are designed to create a dome of radio silence that protects Russian units from GPS-guided missiles. However, every time these systems transmit, they broadcast their exact location to Ukrainian signals intelligence. Using a high-speed anti-radiation missile known as the HARM, the Ukrainian Air Force was able to home in on the electronic emissions of these trucks from 50 miles away. When the jamming stopped, the GPS-guided HIMARS rockets began to rain down on Russian command posts that had been hiding under the electronic umbrella. In a span of 90 minutes, 4 major headquarters were vaporized, including one that was hosting a senior Russian general who had arrived to oversee the offensive. The death of a high-ranking officer triggered a collapse in the coordination of the southern Russian pincer. Without clear orders, 3 separate Russian battalions began to retreat simultaneously, clogging the only 2 roads leading back to their primary staging area. This retreat quickly turned into a massacre as Ukrainian HIMARS units, programmed with the exact coordinates of those transit bottlenecks, began firing tungsten fragmentation rockets. Each rocket contains 180,000 individual tungsten balls, creating a lethal cloud that can shred anything in its path. The retreating Russian columns were caught in the open, with no air cover and no way to maneuver. The resulting carnage was so extensive that even veteran Ukrainian observers described the scene as a graveyard of iron. This was the final major payoff of the second phase of the battle, proving that even a retreat is a high-risk operation in a theater of war where the enemy can see every move you make. But as the sun began to set on the first day of the offensive, the Ukrainians realized that the largest threat was still 3 miles behind the Russian line, preparing for a final, desperate surge that would test the limits of the Ukrainian defense. As the light faded across the Donbass, the Russian High Command committed their final strategic reserve in a desperate bid to salvage the narrative of the spring offensive. This was the 91st Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, a unit that had been held in the rear for 3 months, accumulating a stockpile of North Korean manufactured ballistic missiles and Iranian-designed drones. Their mission was to launch a saturation strike on the Ukrainian command bunkers in the rear of the Avdiivka sector, hoping to decapitate the defense before the next dawn. The problem for the Russian planners was that the United States had recently integrated a new layer of electronic intelligence into the Ukrainian air defense grid. Every time a North Korean missile launcher began its fueling cycle, the thermal signature was picked up by a space-based infrared system orbiting 22,000 miles above the Earth. Within 30 seconds, the coordinates were transmitted via a secure satellite link to a Ukrainian Patriot battery hidden in a pine forest 20 miles away. The math of this engagement was cold and unforgiving. The Russian missiles, costing approximately $2 million each, were intercepted by interceptors costing $4 million. But the value of the Ukrainian command center they were protecting was measured in the lives of 10,000 soldiers and the integrity of the entire front. The final payoff of the day began at 2300 hours when the Russian brigade attempted a massive nighttime river crossing to bypass the northern Ukrainian flank. They used amphibious armored vehicles and pontoon bridges, moving under the cover of a heavy smokescreen. It was a classic Soviet-era maneuver that had worked for 80 years. However, the Ukrainian defenders were equipped with the latest generation of thermal imaging cameras that see through smoke as if it were clear air. As the Russian vehicles reached the midpoint of the river, the Ukrainian artillery fired a series of precision-guided shells that were pre-programmed with the exact GPS coordinates of the crossing site. The first shell destroyed the lead pontoon, causing the entire bridge to collapse into the freezing water. The following 30 minutes were a chaotic struggle for survival as Russian soldiers in heavy gear attempted to swim to the shore under a constant rain of mortar fire. The Russian losses in this single failed crossing exceeded 400 personnel and 50 vehicles. This was the moment the spring offensive officially died, as the Russian command realized they no longer possessed the tactical surprise or the technical means to overcome a digitized defense. The final tally of the deadliest day of the year revealed a landscape of utter ruin for the Russian Federation. Over 1,000 soldiers were confirmed killed or wounded in a single 24-hour period, with over 100 armored vehicles reduced to charred skeletons. The 600 assault actions had resulted in a net gain of 0 territory for the Kremlin, while the cost of the operation was estimated to exceed $1 billion in lost equipment and spent munitions. The Ukrainian side, by contrast, had maintained their lines with minimal casualties by relying on the leverage of low-cost technology over high-cost mass. This battle was not just a victory for Ukraine. It was a demonstration of a new era of warfare where the transparency of the battlefield makes large-scale offensives a form of institutional suicide. As the sun rose on the second day, the surviving Russian units began the long walk back to their starting positions, leaving behind the wreckage of a dream that had been dismantled by drones, satellites, and the cold logic of modern attrition. The deadliest day was over, but the structural damage to the Russian military machine would take years to repair, if it could be repaired at all.